The Ryan-NYP, the Spirit of St. Louis. Welcome back to the channel. Let's go take a look at this beauty, this historic airplane, the Spirit of St. Louis. Little disclaimer before we go, you can pause and read that if you wish. I'm not a CFI. I am a pilot in real life, and I'm a teacher by career, and I just love sharing my flying experiences. So we've been reviewing, apart from the normal basic techniques of flying, my basic, my intermediate, my advanced course that we have on Udemy and Skillshare and a number of other places. We also take a look at new planes. As you've seen in some of these YouTube videos, we just take a look at a plane, learn how to fly it properly, use the POH if there is one, and go through the steps of learning to fly it properly. This is one of those challenging planes that not very many people are flying it in the sim. We look around just to see how many are actually flying this. It's included with the 40th anniversary, and we find that very few will fly it. One of the reasons is there's no windshield, and it's difficult to fly when you can't even see what's going on. And some will say, well, we'll just look at instruments. Well, there's certainly basic instruments in this airplane, enough to get you flying back in the day. So let's learn a bit about it. Let's learn a touch of history. Let's get an idea. There is no POH. They didn't make those things back then. Probably some scribbled notes about how to make this happen. We'll learn 3 speeds. We'll learn rotate speed, cruise speed, and landing speed. That's it. So it's going to be very short compared to a lot of my in-depth learning videos about specific airplanes. This is, as you can see here, the NX211 experimental. And that's what the X stands for, is experimental. And it was made by Ryan Airlines of San Diego, specifically for Charles Linbergh. Now in here, you'll see the avatar that they made for me. This is the Got Friends avatar they made for me with the streamer collection. That's a free download if you guys want it. And you'll get your other favorite streamers in there also from Twitch. The idea of the mustache was that it still had the setup that I use when I'm flying vintage airplanes when I wear the leather helmet. So that's why you see that. You'll be wondering why it's me there with a mustache. But here we have a radial engine. I'm going to show you a visual of what a radial engine can do and at least give you an idea of how that works. You'll notice it looks very similar to the Ford Trimotor. The Ford Trimotor had a single engine out front like this right behind the spinner, but it also had 2 others. And back in these days, back when this plane was built specifically for this Atlantic Ocean run, the conventional thinking at the time was, let's put 3 engines on it for safety. We're going across the ocean. And Charles Linbergh said, no, 3 times more chance of failure, a single pilot and a single engine, let's go. And the rest is all fuel. And this is one of the reasons why. And we're going to look at a cross section of this plane. Now this is the 1928 version. You see in the sim they give us the 27 version and the 1928 version. And here in the 28 version now, he's got flags on every country he touched down in or was in. And in the 28 version, he had already gone down to South America and all through the Americas and did a lot more flights. All told, this plane, even though there was only 1 built, this plane did 174 flights. The big one, the historic one, of course, is the Atlantic crossing, where he won the $25,000 purse at the time. The plane took about $6,000 to build it, but he won the $25,000 purse, and that was big back in the day. So let's find out a bit more about it. It is available in sim for PC and Xbox, included with that 40th anniversary. And we'll go take a look. There'll be another video that accompanies this around the same time on the Jenny, the Curtiss Jenny, the JN4 Jenny. And that was also, well, although the Jenny was a decade earlier than this one, or 12 years earlier than this one, it also came out with the 40th anniversary, and it also had a skid at the back, and it also had, you know, an even older plane. So we'll go take a look at that. Also 2 historic planes, and we'll learn why. But this one's the challenge because there's no windshield and there's very limited instrumentation, and it's really seated the pants flying, you guys. They did pilotage and dead reckoning. And how could he do that? He just looked out the side windows. There's no actual glass in those windows. And he would just pull down his goggles. He already had the leather helmet, and he would just look out one window or look out the other. As simple as that. And that's how they flew. These chocks you see on it are the parking brake. Even though there was no parking brake back in the day, there's actually no brakes. You'll see there's no disc brakes or anything of the sort. They weren't even invented yet. And they just put chocks on in front of the plane like that. So the Spirit of St. Louis, the plane developed from the Ryan M2, but it was a complete redesign. Charles Linbergh said, I don't want to be between the gas tanks and the engine in the event of a failure or in the event of a crash. So you'll see he's sitting behind all the gas tanks. They're overhead in the wings, close to the fuselage, and they're in front of him, a ton of them. And you see in here, it was sponsored by a group of businessmen in St. Louis, Missouri, and a cost of $6,000 and built in 2 months. I mean, they even said, we can build this in 3 months. He said, nah, we need it in 2. And the actual flight, the historic flight that he took, you can see here across the Atlantic Ocean from Long Island, New York to Le Bourget near Paris, May 20th to 21st in 1927. Now, before this flight, he actually had to bring it from San Diego, where it was built. And so that's where he wrung it out. That's where he figured it out and got comfortable with it, that, across the USA kind of flight. And then he took off from New York once he was comfortable with it all. So it was modified to Linberg's specifications. It was really just a complete redesign to make it work for him, because the sole purpose was to get across the Atlantic. The sole purpose. That's it. And that's quite a grueling experience. He faced frostbite, certainly the cold open windows while he's flying. Had some food on board, had a life raft on board, and it was brutal. And he fought sleep the whole way, of course, right? Normally seating 5 people, the Ryan M2, all those seats are removed, even though they were wicker seats also, just like in the Ford Tri-Motor. They were replaced with gas tanks. Even the windshield wouldn't fit the specs, because now it's all gas tanks out front. And so he sat behind a wooden panel with some instruments and just the side windows and a periscope. So that's what we're going to go take a look at. So there's an actual photograph they took back in the day. Here's the start of the look of it. I'll show you a more complete picture in a second. But this is one of the more innovative design decisions involved placing the main fuel tank in front of rather than behind the pilot seat. Like that. They have to think about, of course, the balance of the plane to make all of this happen. There's the raft, the food, the fuel tank, the main fuel tank. There's actually another one. We'll show you another picture, and there's some in the wings too. He can't see directly ahead as he flew. As you can see, there's no other way to put a windshield in there. Even if they built one up here, he'd have to stand up to look out, and then this rises up in front of him on the top of the wing. So even in level flight, he wouldn't be able to see anything more than way up there. So they built this periscope for him. And he said, he's quoted as saying there's not much need to see ahead in normal flight. I mean, what? This is how we're taught to fly. We look ahead. We look at the horizon. We're looking at visuals out the windshield, and not much need for that, he says. Donald Hall was one of the designers that worked with it. I won't be following any airways. When I'm near a flying field, I can watch the sky ahead by making shallow banks, just like they do on the ground when they're taxiing with a tail dragger. All I need is a window on each side to see through. Interesting, isn't it? And then if needed, he would use the periscope attached to the plane's left side to see what was in front of him. And we'll have a look at that when we go to the demonstration. It works perfectly fine. There's a lever here to push it out and bring it back in again, and it's a perfectly working periscope here in the sim. All right, that's the idea behind it. Here's what it looks like in the sim. The Ryan-NYP. They named it the NYP because it stands for New York to Paris. It's the sole purpose they built the plane. 2 versions, of course, the 28, which has already been around the world, and then the 27, which started out. They're essentially the same plane. All right, here's some specs for you. Single-use ocean crossing, some specs in here. But we're going to go take a look at this, the Wright Whirlwind J5C at 223 horsepower, this radial engine out front. We'll go have a look at that, see what it looks like. Range is 4,000. They built it specifically with enough fuel for 4,000 miles. Payload is 1 person and 425 gallons of fuel. Well, there's a raft and there's some food and stuff on board, but mainly that's the payload that he has. So not much to fill in here. You can see some of the specs there for other things you might want to look at. Certainly no retractable gear in the day, no flaps either. There's lots of things that aren't there that we enjoy today, but it was still purposefully designed for this trip. Now here's the actual engine. This is a picture of the engine at the Smithsonian Institute, where this thing resides now in Washington, D.C. There are replicas all around the world. I saw the replica of this at EAA headquarters in Oshkosh this year, and was a beautiful display. It was a full-scale replica hanging from the ceiling, but it was low enough that it was just above our heads. It was a wonderful looking sight. full diorama down below and beautiful history bell on the wall. They did a really nice setup for this. So this engine, as you can see, air-cooled just from the fins, typical radial engine. You can see in here, 9-cylinder radial. Pratt & Whitney was making the same sort of thing back in the day. They considered both. And you know, there were 3 competitors for this kind of engine back in the day, but this one certainly worked out well. Made by Curtiss-Wright Company. And, you know, this is the Curtiss Spirit of St. Louis, as they call it. The Wright Whirlwind J5C radial engine. So single row, 9-cylinder, air-cooled, an engine-driven fuel pump. And this was new at the time. It was like, wow, that's so cool. An engine-driven fuel pump. We get it. We do the pump first to get enough pressure in the lines. We do the primer to get that fuel right up into the spark plugs, into the intake manifold, and then from then on, once it's running, just like cars today, you guys, your car that you have in your driveway does the same thing. Once it's started, it has its own fuel pump to keep things moving. 237 horsepower, tons of fuel for the trip. Another couple of innovations here. The rubber shock mounts helped with the vibrations. The automatic valve gear lubrication was an ingenious thing to make sure that the valve gear lubrication going on in here, each of these valves, these overhead valves, the intake valve and the exhaust valves, all had to be lubricated. They're all moving it all the time. And this was a constant thing through the whole trip. And for that reason, it had something like 4 gallons of oil on board. And so, you know, nowadays when we look at an oil change on a car, I just finished doing the oil on my car, typically 5 liters. I'm Canadian, so we measure it in liters, but typically, or maybe you'd call it 5 pints, but, you know, 5 liters of oil, 4 liters for the engine and 1 liter for the oil filter. This had 4 gallons, which was, you know, takes 4 liters to the gallon. So we had basically 1 gallon of oil in our cars today that lubricates around. It sits in a pan down below and it gets pumped around and keeps everything lubricated. Here in this engine, 4 gallons of oil were sitting in a tank of its own to lubricate this engine. It was kind of fascinating how that worked. A single piston going up and down in each one of these. And to give you an idea what that looks like, I'm going to bring over a picture that's really cool. I've used this before to talk about, I did a whole lesson just on radial engines, but this is a really nice picture to show you how a radial engine works. Now you'll see there's 2 cams here, these 2 red circular things with bumps on them. They call those cams. All right, you'll hear in modern engines, you'll hear about overhead cams. Well, the cams are up top, overhead of the engine. Here they're in line with the radial engine. The center part's right here in the middle. And you can see this gear meshing that helps with turning the cams precisely at the right points. Now, the outer cam here only does the left rod or the intake rod. And if you look and see when that actually opens, you'll see that it will open like that. That's pulling fuel down into the... Let's just have a quick look at that. Don't get confused by all the movement here, but let's just watch this one valve where my cursor is right now, if you can see that properly. And that one valve, I'm gonna, now that I see what it looks like, I'm gonna move this like this without getting it too blurry. There, that's probably a better picture. All right, this one valve right here only, this is the intake valve. It's going to let the fuel in. Now in this position that it's in right now, it's closed. It's pulled up against the valve opening. In this position, it's now open and it lets fuel in. The fuel comes down in and it gets sucked in by the piston moving downward. All right, right here, the valve opens, sucks fuel in, compresses the fuel, ignites the fuel, which is the downstroke, and then pushes it out the exhaust. This is actually very cool. And we're not doing a whole lesson on engines right now, but this is such an educational animation here. It's so well done. This is from Wikipedia. I better make sure I have the right credit here for where we find this. I certainly didn't make something this beautiful. And so this gives you an idea what they mean by cams and what they mean by tappets, rockers. You notice these are rockers. When we look at the Jenny, you'll see visible rockers on the engine, visible while you're flying it, you know, so that's what they call them, rockers. It rocks up and down. And these are the push rods, and the push rods are controlled by the actual cam, as you can see that. So the outside cam here, now that I've had a closer view here, this outside cam pushes the exhaust the exhaust manifold valve, or the exhaust valve that goes to the exhaust manifold, the hot part that comes out and goes out and gives you smoke and gives you heat. All right, this intake valve we were just looking at, it opens the valve and lets the fuel come in. When you prime the engine, you're pushing fuel down to rest on top of this valve, and as the valve pushes down and the stroke is going down, it's sucking that fuel air mixture into the cylinder, compressing it, exploding it, and then pushing it out the exhaust valve. Pretty cool. And this continues on, and the cams here keep each of the valves open at all times. Well, you're going to need some lubrication for these gears, lubrication here for this part that's turning, and you'll also need lubrication on the cams themselves as they rub against the valves or the push rods. Everything here needs to be lubricated, or you're going to wear this engine down really quickly. And so all that oil had to go in there and keep things moving all over the place. So it's a fascinating picture. Each piston does its own power stroke, then the power stroke, then a power stroke. Each one of these, and they're only showing 5 here, but there's 9 of them that we use. Some of the engines we look at are also 7s, but this is a 9-cylinder that we're actually working with. It's a fascinating piece of machinery, and it's got a very unique sound to it, having that many cylinders in a radial, as they call it, position, which makes for a very wide diameter at the front. When we looked at the Wildcat YouTube video, I talked about how that radial engine out front, they built the fuselage with that diameter in mind all the way back. So it's a very stout looking airplane. Some will call it the fat front continues all the way back to a slight taper, you know, because they made use of that radial engine and the air flowing through it. In this plane, we actually have heat of that engine going back, and he does have a heat lever that he can pull more of that heat back in. And so that was all of that stuff, the automatic valve gear lubrication, the rubber shock mounts, air cooled. I mean, even before this, back 12 years earlier, we look at that, the Jenny was water cooled with a V8 engine, you know, like on our cars. Water cooled means heavy water. Water's heavy. You put that into an engine and have that circulate around with a radiator, and you've got yourself extra weight here. So as you saw, and even today, most piston engine airplanes are all air cooled with all of these kinds of fins on them that you see here. And all of these fins let the air take the heat away from the engine. Interesting stuff, isn't it? I think it is anyway. They rely on this stuff. It had to. It had to keep them alive. It had to keep them flying. There's the skid at the back. This is in level flight now, this diagram. The skid would normally sit on the ground, and this thing would be tilted up like any tail dragger. There's the right engine. This is actually pretty cool. I used it, even though it's a bit blurry when it's exploded up here. It's interesting to see. There's that main fuel tank we talked about. They had some gasoline in the wings too, which planes today still do. The Cessna 172s that I fly, all the gas is in the wings, close to the fuselage. Here we have another gas tank here, and here is the oil tank. Look at the size of this thing out front. All this weight is sitting right here, the main weight right over top of the wheels, the pilot sitting back here, and then all the lighter stuff back here and not even further back. Back here is where the raft was. Right here was where food was, where you could easily grab it, and everything getting closer and closer to the center of gravity right here. So the center of gravity has to stay within design limits for safe operation. So they had to design this whole thing so that it was still balanced in flight and balanced when it was on its wheels on the ground. So here's what it looks like in the sim, you guys. Here is the Microsoft Flight Simulator weight and balance to show us what that looks like. Nice visual here where it shows us the balance has to be between the forward and aft limits as he used up all this fuel directly right over top of here. This is actually the wings here. As that fuel was used up, it wouldn't change the calculation much. But certainly as this fuel tank was used up and as the oil tank was burning off oil, I don't think that made much of a difference, but certainly the fuel would get drained from here. Then you would see this also changing. And so they've got a wide berth here. Some of the planes like the Jenny has a very tiny area in there they got to stay in. You can play with these numbers. The spreadsheet for fuel, you guys, pretty cool. You can see main tank 1, 2, and 3. Left main and right main in the wings. The payload's just the pilot, and you can see in here it's working out great. This is a default 50% configuration, but you can load this thing right up and feel what it feels like when you are doing this flight. Remember that if you are going to load it up like the realistic flight itself, then do not attempt to land with that much fuel. All that fuel sitting forward like that, you'll probably nose over as you're slowing down or even trying to stop. And I was warned by that. I was warned about that by Ace of Spades, who was also a moderator on my Twitch stream. And he said, whatever you do, don't fly with full tanks. Well, what's the first thing we do when people give us a warning in the sim? Let's see what he's talking about. And sure enough, I nosed over when I landed. But so you could easily come to this screen in the sim while you're flying and remove the fuel before you landed, because we're not doing that 30-hour, 33-hour trip. I leave it at 50% and it works fine for our testing. Now, normally I go to the 7 steps, you guys, and this is what we use. This is the 7 steps. It's like, wait a minute, there aren't 7 steps that we can play with here. So, you know, when I look at this, we're just going to learn the vital speeds and then take it out for a spin. I'm going to give you one picture of a cockpit orientation. And so that's how simple it is. The real challenge here, and the reason I picked this, first of all, a lot of people asked for it. Let's do this plane because nobody wants to fly it. They're not sure what to do with it. And then secondly, it's historic. When else could we jump into the cockpit of a Spirit of St. Louis and go fly it? You know, I mean, there's that thrill in itself, even though in a sim at home, it's certainly not the same as being in the real deal. But it gives us a bit of a feeling, and that's actually pretty thrilling in itself. So let's go learn, at least learn what we can. Typically, cockpit orientation, just get to know where the instruments are, the controls are, whatever's available. Mapping controls if you want to. I'm just using a standard stick. I'm using the hat switch on my alpha yoke so I can look around. And I'm using the mixture and throttle. That's it. There's no blue lever. There's nothing else. So the mapping part is easy. I don't even have a screen for it for you. And then we'll look at, you know, cruise settings. It's just a speed in the middle cruising range. No manual, no POH. So what are we going to do? Well, let's just learn the speeds and then go fly. Simple as that, you guys. So just memorize the 3 main speeds. Normally, I would show you a picture of the cover of the manual or a link to the manual. There's no PDF. There's nothing. Well, it was a single-purpose design plane for one person. No one else had to fly it. No one else had to distribute it. They didn't make any more. Why would they go to making a publication? So here we go. Here's the airspeed indicator. I've lightened it up using a paint program just so you can see it better. Everything's painted black. Even the dials are black. I'm not sure if that's to reduce glare on his face for all those hours, or if that's just the way dials were back in the day. But very hard to read in the plane, even with full daylight. You have to really zoom in and kind of squint to see that. So I've lightened it up just so we can see it here, and I've zoomed in. 0 at the bottom at the 6 o'clock position, and it starts from there. When you see airspeed alive, you'll see it start to move here as you're taking off. And as you can see, we're going to be rotating up around the 80 mark way up here. There's our rotate speed right there. Wow. It'll get up there very quickly. 237 horsepower with that single person on board and 50% fuel. You'll see us take off pretty quick. All right, cruise at 100 to 120, somewhere around here. I couldn't find a spec for that. I just looked at fuel economy and said he probably cruised around here. I'm sure we could find more. I have combed many websites to see this. And then finally landing part at 86 miles per hour. Now in the demonstration, I'm going to take it up to altitude, well, a couple of thousand feet. And we're going to do a power on stall, which is your typical takeoff, just to make sure we know what not to, you know, how slow can we go. They're recommending here rotate at 80. So you can bet that a power on stall should be around there also. And so we don't want to get much lower than that. On the landing, it says 86 miles per hour for landing, which I'm very surprised to hear. There are no flaps, so we can't get any lower than that. And in fact, we're going to test it. We're going to come in with an engine out, heading to the airport, and just see how low we can go. I'm going to push it probably around under 70. My normal 172 landings glide is 68, or depending on the model of the 162, or sorry, the 172, the model of it. One of them is 68, the other 65. I come in at 65 a lot of times to land. Nice and quiet, engines idling. We're going to try that here. I'm going to guess we can't get below 65, but we might even squeeze it down to 60, but I'm sure it'll fall out of the sky by 60. That's way too low. And, you know, they've got us rotating here. Typically, rotate is 1.3 times stall. So this is more than 1.3, so maybe even stall at 70. We'll see when we get to the demo, but we'll check it out. Anyway, landing 86, we wouldn't normally push it. We wouldn't normally squeeze that into this low area, but we will for testing in the sim. without worry about life and limb. Testing in the sim without worrying about life and limb. There's my motto. All right, so learning a new airplane, get or make a checklist. No such thing. You can make your own checklist. It'll be a scrap of paper. Look, they got a part right here where you can just post it right here. Put a post-it note on it. That's all we need. But you know, this is interesting. We're going to have a quick look at the cockpit just to see what these instruments are. But you can see they've just put plywood here, if they had plywood back in the day, and they just painted it black. We're good. And this is the view, you guys. We're looking out the left window, we're looking out the right window, and if he ever wanted to look straight ahead, he would use the periscope, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, but what we're talking about here is the checklist. The only one available is the one in sim. This is the most elaborate page. All the rest of them, if you go to the taxi page, there's 2 lines. And the taxi page will say open the throttle and then steer with your rudder. You know, there's very basic checklist, you guys, and it's going to remind, this is where I got the rotate speed from. This is where I got our oil pressure, acceptable pressure from. I mean, I got it from here. And then I found some websites that confirmed it. In here, we're pointing up, the nose is pointing up, we're sitting on the ground, so you can see here, there's 0 and level flight. We're going to be looking at this in the demonstration, and we're going to trim for 0. This bigger lever you see here is your trim lever. As you use your trim wheel inside your home cockpit, this lever will move forward or backwards as you trim it. So we did have elevator trim, but that was it. No aileron trim, no rudder trim, no other features or fancy stuff. Certainly all the different valves from the different fuel sources, the main fuel shutoff valve right here, you know, things like that we're going to look at, and then we'll understand what instruments we're playing with here. But anyway, there's your get or make a checklist for all phases of flight. So we've covered 1, no POH. 2 was vital speeds. We got 3 of them, right? Rotate, cruise, and landing speed. 3 was multiple engines. We don't have that. 4 is make or get a checklist. It's in the sim. I mean, look how fast we're coming through our 7 steps to learn things. We're all the way up to step number 6. It says right on top of the screen, cockpit orientation. So here's what I've shown you just to give you an idea. It's still very hard to read all these things. We're gonna have to zoom in with our mouse wheel or our head tracker and see what's going on. I mentioned to you before the tall lever, which I haven't labeled here, is your trim. Great big lever. So we've got the 2 big levers, your stick to control the plane, your flying stick or yoke if you want, your trim lever right here. So you'd push forward to level flight when you see it's in level flight and your visual shows you level flight, which is not this view right now. And then you would just trim using this lever. That's how they did it. We're going to use our trim wheel here in your home cockpit. If you have such a thing, you should have such a thing. Here's the throttle lever down here, and we'll also see what other levers there when we get to it. There's the periscope and the periscope lever to push it out. It's in the out position right now. We'll go see that in the demonstration, and we'll go look in it and see what it looks like. But it does work. It's just, Charles Linbergh said we don't need it. You know, I don't know if he ever did use it. He just, you know, he has the leather helmet, he has the goggles, he puts the goggles down over his eyes, sticks his head out the window if he needs to see ahead, especially with taxiing, especially with landing. And that was it. He said he didn't need to use it. It was there just in case. The essential gauges, we'll talk about those. So we do have 2 things we'll see in the demonstration. Down here is the fuel pressure. It's like a wobble pump, right? We push it a few times and that builds the fuel pressure in the line. Now we use the primer. We pull it out in a few times in the winter, probably even more. He did this flight in May heading into, you know, in the spring heading into summer. Who knows how much primer he needed to get the engine running. And then up here we see the ignition. It's just a sticky note with a little square hit spot, and it says to hand crank the propeller, which is what they did back then. They had a person out front, you ready to go, turn on the ignition, sorry, the magneto, turn that on, and then now they would actually hang off that propeller and put all their weight into it and stand back quickly in case it started. I saw them do a video of a replica Spirit of St. Louis. There they were hanging off the propeller blade, pulling it, nothing happened. Hanging off the propeller blade, pulling it. One guy got worn out, another guy took over, hanging off the propeller blade. Finally, they got it running. And, you know, back in the day, they knew if they over-primed it, they knew if they flooded the engine and all the rest of it. But here, we just click on here. Everything's working just great. And then we're going to look at our oil pressure, make sure that it's around 50. I think it's this one. And then we will, it's over here. And then we will just go from there. It's real simple, you guys, pretty simple. So let's have a closer look here. Here's a view of the one at the Smithsonian, compliments of the Smithsonian. I want to make sure to give enough credit for the photos that I use. Here's from the sim, the photo I took inside the sim, and look how close that is. They obviously used photos from the Smithsonian to build this airplane here in the sim. And right down to the wicker basket. Of course, this wicker basket is really worn from all those hours of flight. This plane, although there was only one made, it actually flew 174 flights. So not only did it do that, you know, the very first flight was from San Diego over to Long Island. So coast to coast, really. And that's where he got used to the plane and saw how it worked and figured out how to trim it and all the rest of it. And then when he took off a couple days later, you know, in May from Long Island to do this big long trip, that was the first 2 flights. And that was, of course, the historic flight that everybody remembers. After that, though, another 172 flights all over the world, and went down to South America and all through the Americas and did all kinds of flight, airmail, and all the rest of it. So this got pretty worn, as you can see by the wicker seat here. Here in the sim, it's looking newer. Of course, I've got the 1927 version. Maybe if we pulled up the 1928 version, we might start seeing some subtle differences. Maybe there's a worn seat now. And these wicker seats, of course, were very light. They also used wicker seats inside the Ford Trimotor, if you guys will remember that one. Here's the rudder pedals in here. And you can see that they've got some extra wear panels here on this wooden floor where the heels would touch. Anyway, lots of, I thought fascinating to look at both, right down to the compass card over on the right. The views out the window, there's inside a museum, so they're not going to see. This is obviously a flash inside, so the outside looks kind of dark. Here I've got daylight outside, and we're going to use that for orientation as we actually fly the thing. Remember your control keys in all of our sim planes. The control keys can get you your views really quickly if you don't have a head tracker, if you don't want to use your hat switch, and you can just look around at the different views from there. So the right down to the compass card, airspeed is in miles per hour. As we get closer, we can see that in miles per hour, starts in the 6 o'clock position. The periscope up top, as I mentioned, has a slider to push it out so you can see. Right now we're pointing up into a blue sky, and that's all we see. That's it. But if we change it to clouds in the demo, I'll change it to clouds outside. You'll see it get cloudy in here too. Right now we're pointing up into the sky while the tail wheel's on the ground, so we're going to see sky. As you're in level flight, you'll actually see the green grass of the ground and the blue of the sky, or whatever's happening with the weather, and you'll get a visual of being level. You can use that if you want. I'm going to do it as authentic as possible. Charles Linbergh rarely looked out here. He just poked his head out the window, so that's what I'm going to do. Here's our RPMs right here, and that's sitting right now at, this is actually 0, nothing's happening, even though it says 5 on it. But below that, it says 24. So this would go all the way around to 2400 RPM, and that would be its maximum horsepower speed right there. As we start up, we'll see it come up maybe 6, maybe 7, which is typical in cars today too. In cars, you're sitting somewhere around the 600 mark in idle. Click here to start by hand prop right here, and away we go. All right, the altimeter moves to the left, starts at 0. There's 1,000 feet. There's 2,000. There's our circuit height right there. 1,000 feet right there. There's 5,000 over here, 15 over there. This thing had a maximum of 16.5, so this is plenty on this dial. Up here, I had to note here, they're counting the hours by the looks of it. 5, 10, 15, 20, 21, 2, 3, 4. He's 24 hours in. Nice. You know, it's what prisoners do on the wall of their cell. To count the years, maybe. At first, I thought it was counting the days, but then I thought about it. This was only a 2-day trip. It was 33 hours or so, all right, to get to Paris. So he would be counting the hours for sure. And he would probably just look at the clock. I mean, there's a clock in here right here. So he could just note the time, and then I guess it kept him busy, right? Who knows? This could be number of flights at that moment. Who knows? But I'm just assuming it's the hours, you guys. Or maybe this is 3 different flights and counting the hours. Who knows? But it just gives you an idea how it works. So the challenge, everybody, here's the challenge. Let's fly this plane without a windshield. And let's not use the outside view. Now, I am going to show you that in the demo. I'm going to go outside view to show you side view. Let's say when the tail wheel comes up off the ground on takeoff and when it lifts off, I'm going to show you an outside view once in a while for orientation so we know where we are, flying out of a strange airport in a strange area I've never been in. So I'll do that once in a while. But let's not fly the plane from the outside like you would an RC plane. That's the way most people are doing it. They're going, well, there's no windshield, I'll just use outside view. Well, let's try to do it authentically. Let's do it from inside. Let's look left. Let's look right. Let's get our head out the window. All right. And that's what we're going to do here with this plane. And there's the challenge, you guys. So we'll take it for a spin, get to the practice area at altitude and get comfortable with it, meaning cut power, see where it stalls, give it full power and try power on stall. Do some turns without rudder, do some turns with rudder. All right. And that's what we'll do in the demonstration, you guys, and give you an idea. Head back to the airport now that you got comfortable with the plane, and let's go in and do our first landing. It may not look pretty. Do you want to go for it anyway? We're in the sim. In real life, if it doesn't look pretty, we're going around. And you should practice that also. There's no flaps. There's no other thing to worry about. It's just full power, positive climbing, and we're out of there. Using brakes can cause a nose over. There weren't any brakes back in the day, and you shouldn't use them. But for some reason, they've given us that beauty. They could have easily disabled them like they have with the Jenny. And we'll look at that video too. That's coming up soon. But still, try not to use the brakes. Use your rudder pedals, of course. Do S-turns on the ground to slow down. Pull back on the elevator to make sure that skid stays in the grass. That'll slow you down. All those methods were used in real life. Typically, they would have a few people, one on each wing, maybe one behind, push the plane out, or even Charles Linbergh would be out there pushing also. No need to fly it yet. Push it out to the runway or push it out to the grass where they're going to take off, and then get in the plane and everybody disappears. And so they didn't taxi a skid plane around because it was hard to maneuver, and there's no steerable wheel here. There's no differential brakes in the real thing. So here we're lucky enough we can taxi with it. There's no scrape on the ground. We're not wrecking the asphalt. We're not digging troughs in the grass. And we have differential brakes to do our turns. But I'm still not going to use them at all. I'm not going to use the differential brakes at all. We'll see how it goes. If you really want your plane to turn quickly, give it a shot of propeller, believe it or not. That shot of propeller puts a lot of wind back there, and it hits the rudder and kicks the tail out. So that's how you would make your turn, you guys. Give it a shot of power and full rudder. Then do circuits again and again and get comfortable with it. In my demo, I won't keep doing circuits, may not even do a circuit, but I still want to try a couple things, including stalling on our approach to the airport. We'll end up doing one of those by accident because we're going to find that low end where you should never go below it. Now, I'm guessing it's around 70, but we'll see how that goes. All right, let's go to a demonstration, you guys. But as we've done with the YouTube videos, I don't do the demonstration here in the middle of the presentation because most people finish the demonstration and then stop the video, and they don't realize there's a follow-up or there's questions or there's something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to the finish line, then I'll do the demo, and then you can stop it anytime you want and you're done. All right. So that's what we're going to do. Change your fuel, by the way, to low before landing, but even take off with full fuel, see how that feels. And then come into land, but make sure you go into your weight and balance and drop your fuel down to at least half, all right? Or you might nose over like I did. And then do forward slips. I'm going to demonstrate that anyway, and it works really well. Here, they do have a view out the right side that will work for us, which would be the equivalent of Linbergh looking out the right window to land, all right? As you can see from the quote in here from Charles Linbergh, I couldn't help but put this in there. Very eloquently put, the Spirit of St. Louis is a wonderful plane. It's like a living creature, gliding along smoothly, happily, as though a successful flight means as much to it as to me. As though we shared our experiences together, each feeling beauty. Oh, this is like, wow. This is like, wow. How long did it? He had 33 hours to compose this, right? While he was in the plane. As though we shared our experiences together, each feeling beauty, life, and death as keenly, each dependent on the other's loyalty. Wow, it's so true. When you think about this, though, as sweet as this is, and as it's pretty elegant. It's really true. You're depending on this engine to stay running. You're depending on this airplane to get you through the weather and get you there. the airplane's depending on you to manipulate the controls and not hurt it. You know, I mean, if you think there's any kind of feelings, let's personify this airplane and say it's trusting the pilot. You know, it's kind of cool when you hear that, right? It's the same with all airplanes, isn't it? Right? We're trusting that they are built dependably and that they're going to get us there properly. And you know, the feeling beauty, life, and death as keenly, each dependent on the other's loyalty. We have made this flight. We, airplane and pilot, have made this flight across the ocean, not I or it. Kind of cool, you know? Kind of cool. I don't know what the person was like in this obviously this examination of the plane here in the sim isn't getting into the character of the person. And, you know, like all of the historic pilots that have done great things and broken records, it takes a certain kind of person to do that, that's for sure. All right, so any questions, I'd like to direct you to our Discord server, and you can see here the scan code that you can use to grab that. We also have, I've made courses on Udemy that have been there for 10 years or so. You can tell because they were made with FSX and X-Plane with a couple of MSFS thrown in afterwards. I have a new IFR course that just got put onto Udemy, which is very popular and starting to grow. Just got put on a few days ago. And so if you want to learn to fly and you want to learn VFR and IFR, certainly that's all there for you. Let me know, because you saw this video and you tuned in and you took the time and you gave me some comments, I'll find you a discount to my online courses. Contact me on my Discord server, send me a direct message, tell me you've seen the video and that you'd like to know what kind of discount you can get for any of my courses, and I'll certainly find you a coupon or make you a coupon to do that. All right, these are all the places I belong to. The Flight Simulation Association would be great for new sim flyers who are overwhelmed by all there is to do and all that you can do here in the sim. By all means, start there, and they help out newbies and experienced pilots alike get into flight simulation. They're also the ones that do the sponsoring of the FS Expo, Flight Sim Expo, that's held every year at a different location. And a lot of us, streamers and community chat viewers and previewers like you, show up at FS Expo to meet their favorite Twitch streamers, to meet their favorite companies that make products, and also to get all the deals on the exhibitor floor, to go to the educational seminars that are there during FS Expo round the clock. And that's a big thing, and it's done by the Flight Sim Association. There were 2,000 of us there last year, and we were at the Lone Star Museum in Houston, Texas. I also belong to the Society of Aviation and Flight Educators, and this is mostly made up of CFIs or any of us who are teachers by trade. The EAA, Spirit of Aviation, of course, the Experimental Aircraft Association, headquartered in Oshkosh, with a big museum there that actually has a replica Spirit of St. Louis. All right, let's go to demonstration now, everybody. Well, here we go. Let's take the Ryan-NYP Spirit of St. Louis out for a spin. As we get closer to the plane, I can see the doors open. We're ready to get in. This is the 1927 version of the two liveries we have. It just seems to me that when I looked at both of them, the 1928 version had a whole bunch of stickers, flags from all the various trips around the world, all on the front here. So it would be, the 1928 version would be after the big trip. So here we are before the big trip, and in the 1927 version. Let's get back inside now and just see what's happening here. Interesting that the light coming through from the skylight at the top, they actually call this the compass wheel at the back, driven by the wind. And I can't find much information about it except that that's probably the gyro that helps with the compass. My guess. Compasses are magnetic, so they call it the compass windmill. But look at that, steel propeller, engine out there, no windshield. Let's take it for a spin. All right, we have some views here. Just wanted to show you a couple of views. First of all, the sliding periscope right there. Out it goes. You can see the sky, the blue sky ahead. As a matter of fact, if we were to change that to something with some clouds, maybe just a few clouds, we'll see that outside we've got some white puffies, and in here you can also see the same. We'll have a closer look at that in a minute. All the things that we pointed out in the presentation are here. There's your mixture, there's your throttle, And you can see as you just hover over things, there's the primer and the normal instruments that we were talking about. So let's just have a quick look at our views. I'm going to use the hat switch on my alpha. Even if you're using a stick, the alpha will still work. The magneto too has to be, you notice the magneto of your alpha will change the magnetos here on the screen. So you want to be wary of that. Make sure your magnetos are on when we go through our checklist. All right. So the hat switch, if I go back one, it really zooms in. Back one more, does nothing. Okay, to the right. And to the right again. And it's interesting what you see here. It's like a funnel right here. And a tap that you can, it's almost like testing the fuel here, but where does it put it? It's kind of interesting. It doesn't tell us much more about that, but certainly here's the fuel valve. And when you turn the fuel valve, all the other ones appropriately turn on or off. These were various valves that you can use for specific tanks. You remember there are more than one main tank. The huge tank is right after this firewall here, which is really just plywood, you guys, painted plywood. But the three sources that you see here, the two wings and the main one. And then in front of the main one, there's also an oil tank that you would use. So we'll turn on all fuel, and then the main fuel that goes right to the engine. There we go. And the rest of them, you can still play with those if you want to figure out what they're for. But mainly the whole idea is this guy right here, which changes a lot of them for you. Now, do you remember when you look at valves like this, even today, you look at the small valve that might be behind a toilet, you'll notice that if it's in this position, it's in opposition to the flow of the fluid. All right, if it's in this position, it's in the same direction as the flow of the fluid. So that's how you remember which way to set them. All right, so you can tell these are going in the flow of the fluid. These are in the flow, and if I turn this one like this, that means it's off. It can't flow through. And this is exactly the same as water valves that we have in our home. All right, so that's good enough to know. I'm going to go to the right. Believe it or not, I pushed my right hat switch and it went left. Okay, and we can see all the things that we have here. Here's the actual pitch trim. So if you do your wheel, you can see it moving there. There's your trim wheel. So he obviously had to trim it so that he didn't have to hold on to the stick for 30 hours or so. And then the normal throttle, as you can see, there's our normal throttle. And then if you wish, you could just hover and see what each one is. There's the anti-ice, which is carb heat. That was revolutionary at the time. Wow, carb heat. And we saw the trim, and that's pretty much it from here. There's the heat on and off. Yeah, that's important. Manual fuel pump. There we go. Just like you see in a lot of the planes back in the day. Now, manual fuel pump will build up pressure to get the engine started. This engine was revolutionary. It had its own fuel pump built into it, like engines are today. All the normal engines today do that. They have their own fuel pump once you get rolling, but you've got to get some fuel up there. So this primes the cylinder. It gets the fuel right to the cylinder where the sparks need it, where the spark plugs need it. Whereas this one gives you the fuel pressure to get started. Oh, sorry, right here. All right. Now you can see the door is still open. Wait a second. Let's close that thing. Oops. There's a bit of a delay there. There we go. Listen to this. Click. Nice. So now that the door is closed, let's go back to a normal view. If I were to go to the right, the normal right out the window while you're flying, left out the window while you're flying with my hat switch, I'm going to go forward with my hat switch, and look at that view. There's your takeoff and landing view right there. Head out the window. Partially out the window. Put the goggles down, you've got the leather helmet on, and now you're looking out the window. And just push down on the hat switch and we're back to here. Push up and we're there. Down, we're there. Okay, let's get rolling. One thing I wanted to show you before we get rolling, I guess we could actually do it while we were flying. And that is, let's see if we can get in here and see what it looks like out front. Now, right now, the plane is tilted up. It's a tail wheel dragger. We're tilted up. And so we're looking straight up to the sky. And it's not very good definition, is it? As you can see by looking at this. Oops, I hear a plane nearby. Oh, it's just an AI plane. Okay. It actually looks like a Navion B. Yeah, it is a Navion B. That could be Nick, the one who made it. Or it could just be an AI plane, yeah. Pretty cool. The way to figure it out, you guys, is to go into your drone camera and just zoom out and see if there's a tag on them. All right. So let's get rolling. You can see I'm pointed up toward the sky, and that's why the periscope is there. But if you look on the outside again, sorry for flipping around here just a second. Look on the outside again. And if we get a closer look in here, you can see it is poking out right there. And that's the periscope out the side of the engine. Now, if we pull that back in, and you can see it's now pulled in and streamlined, which is the way he flew for the majority of the time. He said he rarely used it, or he said he didn't use it, or something, but I'm sure he checked once in a while. You can look ahead and see the weather or something. But, you know, poking your head out the window at the speeds they used to fly these things was the thing back in the day. For now, I'll close it, keep it streamlined, and let's get this thing started. So as I mentioned, we have fuel pressure here. There's no real checklist for that. But what we could do, we could look at the checklist, you guys. Typically, you know, 3 or 4 of these will get you your 3 to 5 psi, enough to put some pressure on that fuel line. Now pushing some fuel right into the cylinders themselves, a few times on the primer, we're good. All right, again, they would worry at the time, they would worry about over priming, they would worry about too rich a mixture and flooding the engine, so they would know exactly after trial and error what to do with that. Let's go up and have a quick look at the checklist, make sure we're doing things right. Starting the engine, the fuel shutoff valves are all open. Perfect. Mixture is rich. There it is over on the left. And I'm just pushing it all the way up. And if you zoom in, you'll see it says rich and lean. So it's in the rich position, full forward in your home cockpit. This is how we're going to start it over here. All right, magnetos on. So let's do the magnetos in my alpha in this case, or you can just reach over and turn them to on position. Prime as required, we did. Ignition start. Right, and then throttle closed, oil pressure 50 psi. So the throttle right now, and you can't see it, but the throttle, I've got it all the way back, which is what they consider open. Open meaning, it's interesting they use the term open or closed. In some checklists, open means they open the valve so that you have full fuel, which would be full forward on your throttle. Closed could mean they've closed the valve so there's no fuel. So let's just see what happens. I'm going to leave it in the idle position, and we'll just give this thing a start. When you do this, it's the same as pulling the prop. They would have someone outside, there's no electric starter, and they would just grab the blade and put all their weight on it and throw that thing and stand back real quick. Because if it catches, it's going to go. Well, let's try that. Prop clear. And let's just check. We checked all fuel valves, we checked that, magnetos are on. I probably am not doing the right click spot because we can't really see it. Right here. There it is, right there. Hand prop the airplane. Here we go, prop clear. There we go. Had to find the right spot and hold it. And you can see here we've got some RPMs happening. It's sitting around idle, but to warm it up, we're going to bring it up to around 10. It might start moving, so just watch it. Remember, they didn't have brakes back then, but yeah, the parking brake is on. That's good. See the little wheel block there, the chocks as they call it. So we can do a run up while we're here. All right, oil pressure to 50 psi. Let's have a quick look at that. Go over to here, and we can see there's fuel at the bottom, and there should be oil there also. There's added right here, fuel and oil. And if we remember right here, it's over here, and they're saying at least 50 to get started, and it looks like we're good. Again, we just have to zoom in. It's hard. The views are not necessarily the best, and these are tiny little black dials. So we're sitting at 90, and as we give it more throttle, you'll see that go up a little more, or it'll stop at a certain point. If we take it to idle, that might even drop a little bit. You can see it coming back here to idle, and it's idling somewhere around 700 by the looks of it, 6, 7, 8, maybe even 900. But you can see that oil pressure drop back, but that's fine. It's still at least 60, which is great. Let's just move this over. I want to just take a look over here. Here's our RPMs. You can see 6, yeah, 700, okay. Which is like your car at home too, same sort of thing. Our car's at home idle somewhere around there. Airspeed's at 0. Remember, this thing starts in the 6 o'clock position, goes around as we discussed. We'd note the time that we took off. And here's our beautiful T&B over here, our pitch information. Everything's right in front of our face. We're great. There's our fuel pressure. I said probably said somewhere around 4 to 6 psi, and that's what we've got for. Perfect. And okay, so we did all of this. Move over to taxi. That's it. That's all there is. Let's go taxi now. Oil temperature at least 40, and we're good. We got oil temperature at 50 and above. Throttle closed. Oil pressure 50 psi. So this is en route climb before takeoff. Throttle closed. Oil pressure 50. Mixture rich, and we're in those positions now. Throttle full. So closed must mean shut off the fuel. Yeah, closed must mean lean or in the idle position. Now throttle says full. Rotation speed 80 as we talked about it. Let's put this up here. Move it over, and let's go fly. It's pretty simple, nothing elaborate here. Not going to be a long drawn out thing. I'm sitting here in the grass. If you just take a look over here, this plane works well on the grass. We're going to get over to the airport, or over to the runway, but remember the up hat switch gets us to here where we can start flying from here. Now keep in mind you can do this, but that seems a bit loud, doesn't it? Now that it's actually running, we don't need to hear the whole thing. I'll turn it up a few times so you can hear the effects of that engine, because it really is a nice sound, right? We could go like this and taxi around, or even closer. And that's certainly an easy way to do it, you guys. Certainly. But let me just get my head tracker going here. Good. But that's like cheating. That's like RC plane flying. But let's do it the way they did it and get a feel for that. Let's stick our head out the window and taxi from here. Now, you still can use a map like they would use. You probably know the airport. We want to go left to this taxiway. Zoom in a little. No, we're zoomed in as far as we can get. So to the left of us is the taxiway, and then turn right on the taxiway, and then over to the taxi. We can take off from anywhere. Matter of fact, I'll probably go here and just take off on the grass. Right now it's an uncontrolled airport. I would just make, my intentions known, and I would just take off on the grass. And this thing's better on the grass. It's got more cushioning. It's got more drag for when we need to slow down. And you'll notice at the back of the plane, there's just, if I can stop it, there we go. At the back of the plane, there's just a skid. That's all it is. There's no wheel there, and there's no steering. So the only steering we get is with enough air coming back toward the rudder. This big huge rudder, when we swing it, will help us with our turning. All right, let's take off the parking brake. Boom. That was a control period, and you can see it starting to move forward. And we'll just do as we said we would do. We'll keep the map handy. Just a tiny touch bit of power. Pull back on the stick to make sure you keep that tail on the ground. And as I mentioned, we'll go over here to the taxiway. I've got full rudder. And you can see it's just a little bit turning because there's just a bit of air coming back from that prop wash. And I'm going to go over here to the grass and take off on the grass instead of skidding across the runway with that skid and leaving skid marks on the runway. Oops, full throttle, and it's not moving very far. Full throttle. Here we go. If you give it a burst of power, there we got a better turn. We're throwing a bunch of air back at the rudder. Sorry, full rudder. I kept saying full throttle. Full rudder to the left. Full rudder to the left. Even now, if you give it a shot of throttle, then you can get that going. That looks about right. Or to look like this, yeah, that'll work. And we would just say to the tower, this is KD Tower, so whatever they'd want to call it, the name of the airport. This is the closest thing we could find. I thought I showed you the picture, but let's do it anyway. We're flying out of. I have to look at the screen here. Kilo Fox Romeo. Wow, I can't even focus on that. So let me just make that a little bigger here. Romeo Golf. Okay, so Kilo Fox Romeo Golf. This is Republic Farmingdale. Now, the reason I had to stumble over that, you can see here, the reason this is not the airport they normally fly out of, it was somewhere around here. And now there's a mall there instead of the actual field, but the field that they flew out of was here to do the round the world trip, or sorry, to do the field is around here where they actually originated the flight here on Long Island. And you can see here's JFK down here, And what I did was I just found the nearest field we could use. Now we could just take it right out of a field where it used to be, but we just found the nearest airport and went from there and spawned into the airport. But that gives us the general idea, and from there you could follow the route of how Charles Linbergh took it up the coast and then over. But that's what we're going to do. We're not going to do the big journey. We're just going to take it for a spin, get to know its stall characteristics and its turning characteristics, come back and do some landings or some touch and goes or something like that. So there's where we are right now. So we would just say, even if you just said Romeo Golf Tower, you know, we could do that for now. If we were focusing on radio communications, we just announce our intentions. All right, we know where we're going. We don't need the map anymore. We just need the checklist, make sure we're doing it right. It's nice that they've given us a checklist, but look at this. That's as simple as it is, you guys. A very simple plane, but not necessarily easy to fly because most of you will want to fly from the outside like this. All right, from this inside view, I can see down there and I can get rolling. Let's give it full power. Nice and gentle. Take respect for the engine and make sure you've got it. A little bit of right rudder there, as we always do, and it immediately brings the tail up. Tail is up. Let me just go here and show you. See how the tail is up, just like any tail dragger. A little bit of right rudder to keep things aligned as we look out here. And it will pull itself off, although when we get to 80, which we are now, we should be able to rotate just a touch back on the stick and away we go. Nothing to it. And I'm going to just ease off on the right rudder and sort of align that runway with my flight. And there we go. I'm still at 80. I'm going to relax the stick and pick up some more speed here, and you can see the speed picking up to 85, 89, 90 as it gets closer and closer. A little hard to tell your attitude from here, but one thing you can do, let's go, there it is, 95 heading up toward 100. So there's level flight there. Now I've got 100. I'm just going to trim it a little bit higher for climb. I don't really have a VY, VX for this plane, but you can figure it out. If it would stall at probably around the 80 mark, maybe 75 mark, it'll stall. We're going to find out. And certainly you could figure it out from there. 1.3 times stall. It's not a VSO, it's just a VS, you guys, because there's no flaps. And there we are. It's as simple as that. We're off and running. All these puffy clouds around. Let's see what that looks like on the periscope now. Take the periscope out. Realistically, it would add a bit of drag. Oh, it is adding drag. Look at that. Let's pull it back. Does it right itself? Let's right itself ourselves. All right, I'm trying to keep level flight. I'm looking here, right here, and I'm doing reference out the window. So I got it pretty much in the middle like this. Let's try that again. Boom. Yep, look at this. That's realistic. Look at that. It's adding some drag. It's making us go left, and it's tilting. Look at that. That is awesome. Awesome. That's why they have the handle to pull it back in again. All right, there is no aileron trim. There's no other trim other than elevator for pitch. Pitch information is telling us we're climbing at 5 degrees. Perfect. If you want to level it off, we just do a little bit of push the yoke or stick down a little till we get to 0 and see what that looks like on the horizon. Again, in a normal plane, you look out the windshield straight ahead. But here, I'm pushing it down and then I'm trimming. Remember, always use stick or yoke first and then trim it to relieve the pressure. And I can see that the horizon is pretty much around this square block where the periscope is. That's the horizon. All right, and if you want to take the bigger look like this, you can look over here and say it pretty much cuts through the middle of this chart. And it cuts through right here. And that's how you figure it out, but you can certainly look here and just see what you're doing, whether you're climbing or descending. You can also look at, certainly our airspeed's up there already at 110, but you can see whether your altimeter is going higher or not. And it's pretty steady where it is right now. So we're good. There's learning how to fly the plane, very simply put. All right, let's have as I mentioned, let's have a quick look at this periscope. We'll just have to adjust like this with our yoke or our stick to make sure that we're in the right spot. Let's see if we can do some kind of view with this thing. And what we're doing is we're zooming in with the mouse, then we're using the cursor keys on the keyboard to move over. It really does work. Look at that. You can see the horizon. We're looking out toward the ocean from Long Island. There are the clouds, and it looks like we're turning to the right, or we've got very fast moving clouds. I can see here we're pretty much steady. Looking down here, we're pretty much level. A little bit to the right there. Okay, so I'm just going to turn to the right and try to keep that steady. So it can work. I would bet they get their head even further in there, you know, so that it's right in their eyes. And really that's just a 45-degree mirror going out to the left. And over on the left, can't see it from here, I'll just do it this way. Over on the left, there's another 45-degree mirror behind this piece, which then brings the image in. It's the same as a periscope on a submarine going up, but in this case, it's going sideways. It works. And that works really well. If I were to pitch down just using trim, you can see there's the ocean or the land, whatever we're pointing at. It looks like the ocean. Yep, it is. And so it does work. But you wouldn't want to sit here flying like this. You'd never see a plane coming. Back in those days, you didn't have planes all over the place. And you can see them now heading down. I'm just going to bring that back up again. Just pulling on the stick, you guys. And see what it looks like when we're in level flight. What does it look like up the periscope? Let's come back down to here. I am at level flight, like that. And I'm at 0 on the pitch indicator right here. Right? And what does that look like again? Zoom in again, use your cursor keys, and get your eyeballs straight through that thing, and that's what it looks like. So that'll help. I mean, that's the view he had for hours and hours and hours. Can you imagine? Featureless view, ocean plus clouds, or no clouds at all. All right, let's find ourselves an airport and do some touch and goes. What else do we need to do while we're flying? Well, let's see, what's our altitude here? We've been doing straight and level at whatever we're at here. Could we be at 3,000 feet to 2,500? There could be a view that shows us this better, but we'll just do it this way. Get in really close here. Let's see, 0, 1,000. We're just at circuit height. Nice low flying. Good thing there's no mountains around. All right, let's do some turns and let's get used to this plane. There's the look out the window if we needed it. Let's do it from here and get a feel for what we see in our peripheral. Out this window, out that window. And here we're on an angle looking at the periscope. We're not up like this. Although this would be probably the best view. Now I can't see out properly. So let's reset it to normal view. There's normal view. So this isn't helping at all. I'm going to close it. And we're just going to get used to flying like this or poke our head out the window like they did in the day. All right, I'm going to look left, see if there's any traffic. Back in these days, there wasn't any. No one else was flying at the time. Or if there was, it'd be a rare sight. And we're banking left. As we bank left, we can look at our indicators. It's all we have in front of us. But basically, like VFR flight, we look out the window to see the angle that we see. Lots of sky there, lots of ground there. And we try to figure out what we're doing. Now, this is a skidding turn. I've got no rudder input. A skidding turn is not desirable. You're sliding around the corner like a skid with a car on ice. And so you want to add some rudder now. Let's try some rudder with it. There's the normal turn. All right. A little bit of rudder, a little bit of aileron, and that's a normal coordinated turn. If you were to look at the airplane from the outside, you can see that. There's the rudder. Without the rudder, let's try that. Without the rudder, I'm turning. It does work, but it takes a while to get there because it is a skidding turn. If I add some left rudder in, now I've got a proper turn, and you can adjust your angle and figure it out from there. There's a golf course. If we had an engine failure, we're good. I'm pretty much sort of heading back the way I came. The ocean was out that way, so we came facing the ocean once we took off. So we're just going to go this way and find ourselves an airport. Back in the day, they didn't have any types of navigation equipment on board. So we'll do VFR, you guys, and if we have to, we'll just use our VFR map. So look how easy that is. Now I'm still climbing. I'm descending by the looks of this. I'm going to point the nose down. Point the nose up. I'm climbing, yep. I'm climbing at 5 degrees up. There we go. And this should be reflecting that. The funny thing is, like, we're used to altimeters that go clockwise. This one goes counterclockwise from the top, and it's probably sitting, if we were to look at that real close, over to here, it's sitting close to 2,000 now. And it's going to rise this way. It's strange to see it do that. There's the 5, there's the 10, there's the 15. We'll never get up there. Remember, the ceiling for this is 6,500. And the air starts getting thin anyway, so what the heck. All right, let's bring it down. We've got ourselves a couple thousand feet to play with. Level it off. We're going to try a power-on stall. This is important because when you take off from the airport, you're on full power, and people do stall on takeoff because they're not watching their airspeed. What is the power-on stall? So let's find out. We're on full power still. We're level flight. I'm going to just give us a pitch-up attitude. I'm going to watch the airspeed drop. Right now the airspeed was at 100, and boy, is that dropping fast. I think that even at 10 degrees or 15 degrees, we can make this thing stall. Let's do that. So we are climbing 10, 11, 12 maybe degrees of pitch up attitude. Let's have a quick look outside. High, nose. Let's see if we can stall this baby. So 70, wow, that's already low enough. You think it would stall. We got clouds outside. Let's, for the sake of our testing, do a clear sky day. And let's do it like that so that we can see what's going on. There shouldn't be any clouds in front of us now. Now we are very sluggish right now. I went to correct and it didn't really, oh, there we go. It's moving a little. 65 on our airspeed indicator. Ooh. There's an A330 up ahead, and that wouldn't be back in these days. All right, so I'm surprised actually. All right, let's see what we can do here. Up a little more. It's full power, you guys. All right, now I'm sitting at 20 degrees. Nose up. 60. Coming into 55. I'm going to pull the yoke back even more, or the stick, whatever you're using. There I'm at 55. We're looking for a wing drop here. We're going to try and keep it steady. We're coming down to 50. Come on, a little bit more. This is full power. And there we go. Falls off at 55. So now we know. We can do a few more of those just to test it. Remember, left rudder, aileron straight, let it pick up some speed, and then level it off. It's hard to do from here, isn't it? And level off, I said. Yeah. There we go. There's the view we want. Wanted to see something out there, and this is why it's important you're not in the clouds. So now I can see we're level flight. I can also see from my instruments that I should be at level, and I'm pushing the stick forward, and then now I'm trimming it. You can see the trim knob right here, the trim lever moving as I try to trim this and stay level. There we go. All right, there's an airport around here somewhere, and now I'm heading out the other direction. I probably went past it already. Right over there, maybe? We can do it on any field, and back in the day, they would take this thing and land, and then they would ask questions in a farmer's field and see what's going on. All right, the normal checklist here once we get rolling, before landing, rotation speed before landing, final approach airspeed's 86. Okay. Look how simple the checklist is, you guys. 86, and we know that already. All right, from here, I'm just going to have a quick look at the map. I would have a paper map on board, and I'd have a quick look and just see where we are. I would look on the ground, dead reckoning and pilotage. I would look for landmarks. I don't even see our airport. Could it have been way back here? It probably was. We're heading out that way. Let's turn left. We're already turning left because I wasn't paying attention. Let's make sure it's level. Level. So this is very important. I'm finding I'm relying on this more than ever. Almost like instrument flying, almost like under the hood. I see that there's ground and there's sky. I can tell I'm turning left. I can see that I have the bank angle here, and I can see that I'm climbing a little bit, right, to compensate for loss while we're turning. And you can see now, probably about there, I'm heading down here. But they wouldn't have this beauty of a moving map. They would be looking out the window. So you'd be looking out for landmarks. You'd see that sort of shape of the water and find it on your map, all right? And whatever kind of map they had back in those days. Certainly didn't have published maps. You wouldn't have all this built up area. You're looking for water features, maybe railroad tracks, certainly rivers would help. Golf course wouldn't be there back in the day. You're looking for stuff VFR out the sides of the window, because how else are you going to see it, right? And then you'd find your airport that way. So it's kind of amazing that he did this whole trip and he actually found, Linbergh in Paris. He actually found the airport. Probably asked a few people along the way, but I don't think he actually stopped. I think he kept going. It was supposed to be a non-stop flight, I guess. So as you can see here, we're supposed to turn to the south to get back to our airport. I can't believe how far away we got. Just talking a lot, I guess. There might even be small farm strips along the way. But, the only way we can see them really is to go out like this and look. But he'd stick his head right out the window and look down. We're heading straight to the airport. You can see it coming up like that. As long as we keep this heading, we'll be good. And as you can tell, it's very hard to see the heading up there. If you look here, you can also see that there's an inductor compass knob, as it says. You can set the heading that you want. You just turn the knob like that. It doesn't do anything to the plane. Whoops, that's just natural sagging there. And we're pretty high up, so we're going to cut some power and let the plane come down. and get down closer to the airport. And I think I see it up ahead, but we wouldn't have the luxury of outside, so we would do this again. All right, and we'd have a look and see, sticking our head out the window right up here somewhere. I think it's right in there. So let's get down to circuit height, you guys. What are we at right now? We're still at, wow, 4,000 feet. Is that what that says? Mamma mia. All right, let's cut the power completely and do a glide. RPMs are dropping off. We're going to lose some altitude here. You can see now we are descending. There's 10 degrees there. I'm going to trim that for 10. Nice common descent. It's just an angle, you guys. It's a 10-degree angle downward like that with an engine idling. You could even cut the engine and do a glide in if you knew where the airport was. Or the field. I think that's the airport over here. All right, we know what the stall speed is with power on. We didn't test the power off stall. It'll be less than the power on stall, but we're going to keep the plane. It says 86 for the approach, and we're going to keep it like that on the approach. You see, now we're coming down to, hard to read, aren't they? Coming down to 3, I think. 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. 2,500. We want to be at 1,000 for our circuit. So we're getting there. And there should be an airport around here somewhere. Let's do it like they did. No cheating. Okay, there's an airport here somewhere. Aha. And I'm going to keep that airport in this view. So I'll do a forward slip, and we'll just show you how that works, you guys. You don't need to if you've got lots of room. I got enough glide room here. I can glide all the way in without using any other method. I am losing altitude. I'll be fine. But I want to show you that technique. So I'm just going to pull up a bit, keep it level, and then I'm going to use a forward technique to get down there. Whatever is happening in the sim right now, it's giving me the jitters. Wow. Isn't that something? Now that's abnormal. I don't normally have this. So something happening with scenery or the sim or my Windows. Could be Windows is pulling down the next update, getting it ready to install. You never know what's going on. That's not desirable. Who'd want to fly like that? I'm just clicking the outside view. Is it like it out here? I guess it is out this way too. So that's undesirable. I would probably reset the sim and start over again. Unless it clears itself up. Okay, it's clearing itself up. All right. Now be careful as you try to get to the airport in a glide. You might pull up. You might pull up and then you'll find your airspeed dropping off. We're at 70. We're still good. But you can see trying to get to the airport, you might pull up. So don't forget that you typically set your speed, even in planes today, set your speed and then adjust your throttle. So I don't want to go lower than 65, just like in a 172. And then I'll pull this back to maybe 1200 RPM. And there's our airport. So I wanted to have enough altitude to show you this. So what I want to do is I still want to land on the grass. You can certainly land on the runway if you want, but I just want to show you how this works. Some of you already know this technique. Of course, you're flyers. You've been doing this for a while. I'm going to keep that view with the runway in view, and I'm going to land on the grass again. Doesn't look like, I mean, there's taxiway and grass, which might make you stumble. Now what I want to do is get down, pull my power back to idle. RPMs are dropping. And now what I want to do is I want to get down, but I don't want to speed up. So I'm going to use full left rudder and right wing. And I'm doing a forward slip, everybody. Forward slip should not increase your airspeed, although it is increasing, so something's wrong. I'm going to pull back up again. If you notice out of the corner of your eye, it was going up toward 100. So I'm just going to do this again. Wing low, left rudder, and head toward the runway. Lots of room. This thing doesn't need a lot of room. Head toward the runway. I'm adjusting just to stay to the right, to the left of the runway. Like that. Wing low, full left rudder, like that. You can see the angle. Look at that. That's why I can see so well. There's a forward slip, you guys. And now I'm just going to pull back. I'm letting go of the rudder, relaxing it, flaring. A little bit of a flare, doesn't need to be much. The tail will drop with speed, like that. It corrected my angle. And now I'm just using rudder to stay pretty much down the grass. You could check your accuracy by going down the runway. In the sim, it doesn't kill the runway surface. But running that skid along the pavement. Now to stop, there's, you know, there's typically no brakes. I think here they're letting you have brakes, but I'm still going to do the same thing. You've got a skid on the back. So I'm pulling back to make sure the skid, I'm pulling back on the elevator to make sure the skid touches the ground, and I'm going left and right. You can see the mess it's making, but left and right, and you can see I'm not turning, so I'm going to give it a shot. And it gives me a left turn, see that? Because I'm going to hit a building. There we go, that was close. And that shot of propeller came back and hit that rudder and swung the back end around, which is what I needed. So that was a long landing, talking about it and just letting it coast for a long time while we talked about stuff. And now I'm getting back toward the airport. Now typically they would have pulled this out and set it where you need it. Look at that funny tree all by itself. They'd pull the plane out and get it ready on the runway. And then they would take off from there. They wouldn't typically taxi around with a skid and scratch things up, but you know, these planes were pretty light back then. All right, let's do one more takeoff and come back and do one more landing. So straight up the grass, just like that. Rock and roll. Power. Let's watch from the side this time. I think we watched from the side last time, but like that. Tail's already up. And my hat switch isn't working right. There we go, tail's already up. I'm already airborne without even trying. Now I typically would look at my airspeed and pick it up where I'm supposed to. Remember, it was our rotate speed was 80 knots, I think, and 86 for the approach. So let's look more at our airspeeds as we come in this time. That's full power now. Getting up to something that looks normal. Back into the cockpit. Look left. There's our airport. Still climbing. I'm going to level off as we get up to around 1,000, and then we'll just do a normal circuit. Not a hard plane to fly, but you just have to get used to the idea that you can't see forward. And as Charles Linbergh said, he never used the periscope for landing and takeoff. It's just useless. It looks straight ahead, and certainly in this attitude, it's looking up into the sky instead of on the horizon. Here we're coming up on 900, 1,000, right about there. Let's just push the stick forward, level it off. This is a very handy instrument right there. Level it off at right there. I'm doing some trimming. Again, looking out the two windows, you can see we've got a pretty much level attitude right there. Letting go of the stick and making sure it stays that way. And there, we can fly for a while without any pressure on the stick at all. Beautiful. Let's turn back toward the airport and do a landing, and that'll be it for the demonstration. And this time we're going to do it with a power off landing, as many pilots did back in the day. There's the airport back there. We're just going to turn around and land on the grass somewhere. Turning and left rudder. Coordinated turn. Look at that. You can see it kick in. That looks great. Looking left. Looking right. Traffic. Can't look ahead. And then watch your angle. You're going to lose some altitude on the turn. Let's pull back a bit. I'm looking at this. I'm looking out the window. Looking at this. Looking out the window. I didn't even look at my compass heading, so I'm guessing the airport's around here somewhere. Oh yeah, close enough. All right. All right, this time I'm pulling power completely as if I had an engine failure. And a lot of pilots did this to land. They just did dead stick. They're going to make the field. And this is good practice. All pilots practice this. Let's make sure we don't get below 70. So I'm going to drop the nose a bit. Keep it around 70, maybe even 65. Now, you'd certainly talk to the tower if there was a tower. You'd talk to traffic if there's other traffic. But we have the airport to ourselves. All those buildings in front of us. Let's not let it drop below 70, maybe 65 at the lowest. Right? And you really want to do a daring thing. This is what we do in real planes. We actually take the engine to idle. But you could use your mixture and take it straight down like that. Actually, it was a bad angle because I'm coming in over the buildings. But let's see if we can keep this thing above 60. We should be fine. Look at that. Let's go over here. That's not where we want to be. We want to be there. Okay, is that going to work? I don't know. Let's go have a look. What's our speed again? Come back. 60. Don't go any lower. Don't pull up. Here. It's gonna be tricky. Yeah, we stalled right there. So we were around 60 when we stalled, you guys. Remember it said 68? We were around 60 when it stalled. And luckily, no cars were hurt in this demonstration. So there's an idea. Now we know that the two different stall speeds are power on stall when the wing dropped up at altitude. And then here we see when we were gliding in below 60 was dangerous. And I think it said 68. Let me think about it for a second here. 86 was supposed to be our approach under power, right? So gliding in, getting down that low was the dangerous thing. We almost made the airport. And there we go. Let's try the same approach here. What we're going to do is just do a kind of a circuit. Make sure we see what we're doing here. We'll come back to the same runway we were heading for when we had our power off stall. Now don't forget that in real life you try your power off stalls again at altitude. And you would just cut power and try to hold your altitude and just see what your stall speed is. We know now don't go anywhere near 60. And let's give this a try again. We're going to come back. At height we are somewhere around 800 feet. Right here, there's our 1,000 mark, 2,000 mark. We're sitting around 900 now. And we're sort of doing a teardrop turn here, coming back toward the airport. Give you guys an idea where we are. There's the airport. Kind of a teardrop turn here, just a gentle turn to the right. And come back around. This time we'll do the same thing. We'll make sure we have enough altitude and we'll do a power off forward slip. Again, it's always, you know, safe in real life. It's safe to keep an engine running. And in real life, when you practice these things, you don't cut the engine completely. It's a dangerous thing. Beautiful view. Gorgeous countryside. Let's turn around. Nothing coming. A way to actually look up. I guess you could use your mouse to look up. Yep, no, nobody above us. And yep, there's a compass right there, right out in the open where it's not influenced by metal. These are definitely fuel tanks above and fuel tanks ahead. This is one big fuel machine. All right, let's see the airport. Looking out the left just to see, because we're doing a left turn. I want to see an airport ahead of us. It's a bit hazy today. And we should be seeing an airport right about there. Got it. All right. And again, because the left view, you can't really hang out that window, even though he did hang out either window with his head. Put his goggles down in front of his eyes and then turn. I'm going to use the view that they give us in the sim, which is the up arrow. All right, there we go. Pull power. I'm just going to leave it idling. Heading for the airport. Full left rudder. And I'm going to try not to speed up as I get down there. Now I'm still crowding the runway. I'm still going to be way down the other end when I'm done. And you can see that I'm coming in about 100 knots. Not good. There's no flaps. There's no other way to slow it down except pitch. So I could pull it up like that, and that'll drop the speed for sure. Let's have a quick look over here. There's our speed. This might be a good view here. You get to see your speed. Remember, it was supposed to be something like 86 on the approach speed. And at this rate here, we're obviously going to run out of runway, so I'm not going to land. But you can see there, I'm just keeping a wing low and a left rudder, and that lets me descend without increasing speed. And there I'm staying around 75 and coming down for a landing. Yeah, there's still some room up ahead. We'll still do it. I'm down around here. Leveling off, it's at 70. Remember, now we know we don't get lower than 60. Coming over toward the runway. And here's flare and down. And I'm going to just adjust with my rudder. A few S turns, pull back hard on the yoke or the stick and get that skid on the ground. Give us lots of friction. And we're just going to make sure we don't go near the buildings. That's the view. Kind of scary, isn't it? That kind of view. Heading back toward the airport. And it was just too long. You'd want to get down to the numbers again and try and do that properly. But, you know, we still had enough room. There's our lonely little tree again. We're good. All right, let's come to a stop at some point. Beautiful. Oh yeah, let's get over the whole short line. Let's say it was time to put it away. It's pretty simple. We would just pull the mixture back, lean, and it stops. Off go the magnetos. That's it. And we would just reach down and turn off the fuel valve like that. And we would also, right here, manual fuel pump. No, I was just thinking about there was another switch, but that's it. The valves right here are all we need. And we're good. And then we just, out we go. And some of you might have wondered, did he just climb through the window? These windows had no glass in them. They were wide open. He had to dress for the weather. He was fighting with frostbite. He was fighting certainly with cold. He did have some food right here. It would be down in this area here. And like a bag lunch. He also had a raft back here. There was a raft behind here. Back in this area. Very close to his seat. The wicker seat, of course, nice and light. These things are in, you know, like the Ford Tri-Motor has a bunch of these for the passengers too. They were a very light keep everything as light as possible. This is part of that instrument that helps with the compass at the back. It's got a windmill on the top. You think that would be more for airspeed, but they label it as a compass device. Anyway, there we go. That was fun. And it's different, isn't it? It's different because you're just faced with all of this. It's actually a painted wooden firewall. I'm sure it's not a firewall. And as you heard in the presentation, Linbergh didn't want to be caught between gas tanks and the engine, so he wanted to be behind them in case of an accident of some sort. There we go. Spirit of St. Louis, historic airplane. The real one sitting at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and replicas all around the world. I saw this replica at the EAA headquarters in Oshkosh when I was there this year in their museum. What a beautiful display that was. And it's a full-scale replica hanging from the ceiling just above our head with a full diorama down below explaining the whole journey, etc. So that's it. Wonderful. What an experience.